Hello, good afternoon. I'm Jason Liosatos, Global Peace Radio, and I'm absolutely delighted today to tell you I've got Gerald Celente on again. Gerald's the publisher of the Trends Journal, TrendsJournal.com. A warm welcome to you, Gerald. Thank you for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me, Jason.
It's great to have you on, Gerald. Like I've said many times, you're one of the few people who are out there really saying it as it is, and that's why I really admire you. And you're a great inspiration to a lot of us. Believe me, you really are. It's hard to know. Thank you, Gerald. Thank you. It's hard to know where to start, Gerald. As you know, I've just come back from Cyprus. I was there on the ground. There were no riots, which we were surprised at. And I think the main reason is because I'll go on to that later. The Cypriot people are very calm people. I see you as like on the bridge of the Titanic, Gerald, at the moment, because most of the things you say are true, and that's a fact. And it's almost like I see you like you're on the bridge of the Titanic. You're telling everyone what's coming, and even now, with the situation it is, people are still almost in denial, like people who are on heroin in denial or something. And I think Cyprus has been a good thing. It's been a big shock for the people that actually, my God, we are slaves, and if we don't do something about it, and what are we going to do? You know, it's been looking worrying for years. To see people begging in queues, Gerald, for 300 euros a day, like Oliver Twist, it's great. I mean, trust is very endearing, but with unscrupulous gangsters running the world, trust is sometimes a bit dangerous, isn't it?
I mean, who are you trusting? The mafia, the International Mafia Federation? I mean, they're the money changer mafia and the military mafia. The politicians are nothing more than the wise guys that, they're the fronts for the mafia. And the soldiers and the police, they're just no more than the goon squads. And that's what's happened. It's been a complete takeover. One of the covers of the Trends Journal, a recent one, let me grab this over here. We did this one of Jesus Christ chasing the money changers out of the temple. Of course, we updated it. And then you can listen to the words of James Madison, 1800 years later, warning the people that the money changers would use deceit, tyranny, anything that they could to make sure that they controlled the governments by controlling the issuance of money. So nothing has really changed. Only the times have changed, the names have changed, but the game is the same.
Amazing, you're right, Gerald. And like yourself, you've been telling people this for a very long time, and having I bet a lot of people laughing at you. I've been telling people this for years, and I mean, in one sense, I'm not glad it's happening, but in another sense, it's proven to people this. Well, yeah, you're slaves. I remember there was that old Star Trek episode called The Cage, and there was imaginary necklaces around Captain Kirk and Dr. Spock, and if they did anything wrong, the necklaces would grab and they'd fall to the floor. And this is where we are now. We're in a prison of debt, and we've got maniacs running it. There's no doubt about it. There's so many things I want to ask you, Gerald, because I mean, we haven't got much time. I know that. There was one guy, he said most of the people we interviewed were saying, we'll support them, they're our government, we'll support them, they're our government. I was thinking, my gosh, I wanted to chuck a bucket of cold water over him, And one guy that was a member of the Lakey Bank, which is the first one to crash, he said, no, I'm going to put 9,000 euros in there tomorrow because I want to support them. I mean, this is unbelievable,
Well, I was following this, of course, before the crash happened, and they had an election several weeks ago. And they voted the criminals in. I mean, they knew this was going to happen to them at some level. And, I'm of Italian descent. Every nationality has a characteristic or several that defines it. Maybe the Greek Cypriots are into S&M. I mean, because after all, I'm serious. Maybe they like this kind of treatment. Maybe it's in their DNA. Because what self-respecting person keep getting beaten up and laughing about it and liking it? So, I have to say that, maybe that's their trip, because any intelligent person, after they rape you, are going to get raped again and give them more money. So, again, you can't account for people's actions, but you can see the results. And the results are very clear. They're going to get screwed again. You were there. You know the deal. First it was they did it on a Saturday when the banks were closed. But don't worry, the banks are going to open up on Tuesday. And then the banks, of course, didn't open up on Tuesday, but don't worry about it. They'll open up next Tuesday. Oh, the banks didn't open up next Tuesday. They opened up next Thursday. And then, of course, you know the story. It went from what? A 40% raping to a 60 or 80% raping. And some of the people are never going to get their money back that had over 100,000 euros. So it's just, this is who they are.
Thanks, Gerald. And when the banks were closed, do you think they were trying to hide their trail as well? Do you think that was the deal?
No, I think what they were doing, and they're very smart at doing this, is that they try to diffuse the tension, and they let it wear out, wear out, wear out. People forget that right here in the good old USA, when 9/11 happened, they closed down Wall Street for a week. And if you had certificates of deposit, which I did, I couldn't cash them out because they were traded on Wall Street. They're financial instruments. So they let it play out. This is part of the game. And to me, Cyprus was the canary in the mine.
Yes.
Let's see what happens with it, see how it plays out, and then we can get away with it. And you said there were no riots, there were no long queues. And then again, how big is Cyprus? What is it? Less than 1 million people. And again, as you said, they're very subdued kind of people. So I think that was the first test case because after all, Jason, what were we talking about? A $10 billion euro bailout? What was the bailout for Spain and Greece? 130 billion, a couple of hundred billion? So this was chump change. And to me, it was a test.
Absolutely, I'm right with you, Gerald. I agree with you. From being on the ground there, I absolutely agree with you. Let's try it on the quiet ones and see how we go. And I like what you said about the abused. What kind of treatment are they asking for? I was speaking to even young people, Gerald, and I didn't see any fire in them. It was like, oh well, what we got to do this. What can we do? Like the old acronym TINA, TINA. There is no alternative, And I mean, then you got that goon Evianopoulos. From Lakey Bank. Evianopoulos was the one that got the bailout money. Off he goes to Greece and ended up buying Olympic Airways. I mean, no wonder apparently that was one of the catalysts. These guys are maniacs. They like do whatever they want, and I believe we're coming to a point where, Gerald, where they're just almost going to turn around and say, guess what? You were right, guys. Celente, all you guys, you were right. Yes, you're right, we are slave drivers. You're the slaves. Now shut up and get in line and the banks are closed. I'm convinced this is going to happen any time now. The people are rising up. They're getting a whiff of the smelling salts. The amnesia and anesthetizing effects of this system is wearing off. And I'm convinced they're just going to crash. They want to crash and shut everyone up, Gerald. I mean, is that right or not?
I don't think they're going to do it intentionally.
Right.
It's who they are. Everything they touch, they turn to crap.
Yeah.
There's a lot of news. There's a lot of news out now that David Stockman, a former budget official under the Reagan administration, and now he's come out with a book and how things are going to crash. And it's a big bubble. Yeah, no kidding. We've been saying this for years. Yeah, as you know, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. He's one of the contributors to the TrendsJournal. He's been saying it for years. So now even the people that are coming out, and of course Dr. Paul Craig Roberts was the Assistant Treasury Secretary under Reagan. So now people are coming out and they're saying what we've all been saying for a number of years. They cannot keep this going, but there's something else playing out on the other field. And that is war. They're going to take us to war. The war drums are heating up. Look how they're inflaming this North Korea situation. More sanctions on North Korea, more sanctions on Iran, more arms and supplies going into the so-called Syrian rebels. So it's a destabilization, and as you mentioned, whether it's in Greece, whether it's in Spain, whether it's in Portugal or Italy, whether it's now in Ireland, they're having a vote for direct democracy, the people are starting to rise up. So as the people rise up and it gets out of hand, that's when they're going to clamp down, and that's when they're going to divert the people's attention to something bigger. may it be war, terror, false flag, or real. And I say false flag or real, it's not a conspiracy theory. I can give you two big facts that no one can deny. One, of course, is the Vietnam War. There was no Gulf of Tonkin incident the way they said it was. And there was no weapons of mass destruction or ties to Al-Qaeda in Iraq. But boy, did it do the job. And it's going to do it again.
Perfect. Well said, Gerald. Bravo. And also, we also got to say is that in that thing they're going to make a load of dough at the same time with destruct and rebuild and all the rest of it. The US, they're always picking fights with someone like a bully in a schoolyard because it gives them an identity. They know who they are then, don't they? And you've got Russia selling blooming weapons to Assad. You've got our goons selling and giving Russia the weapons to the blooming rebels who I've said I was on RT the other day and I said the rebels are murder tools for the West. They're the West's murder tools and might just to get Assad out. They won't have any blood on their hands. There'll be no coffins coming home. It's absolutely sicko, isn't it? You know, it's unbelievable. It's almost beyond belief. You know, Gerald. You know, I was going to ask you about something else. So many things I want to ask you, Gerald. About I want to bounce to an alternative. So it's like, okay, the system's crashing and everything. Oh, by the way, I want to say this first, Gerald. We found out some amazing things over there from guys in coffee shops. You know, about the gas reserves worth roughly $600 billion or euros and stuff like that, and that's why they're there. The vultures are circling overhead, the hyenas are coming around waiting. The people are wounded, the island's wounded, in they'll come. It's like a monopoly board. You can do things on the top and people down the bottom don't know. But I was going to ask you, how about Bitcoin? Let me ask your opinion on Bitcoin. My opinion on Bitcoin first is it's a heroin. It's heroin, and it's like changing from heroin to cocaine. It's better, but it's still slavery, and you're still in prison. You know, what do you think about Bitcoin?
You know, I don't know enough to comment on it, but I tend to agree with you. And just for a moment, going back to Cyprus, I've been following this for 2 years. I'm very familiar with the gas deposits off the coast, the fighting that's been going on to see who's going to control it. But there's a very important element of this that everyone should recognize, I believe. You were there. You know that the banks were closed. You know that a lot of people didn't have any money. Now let's suppose you had gold or silver. You think you could buy what you needed? You think you could get what you want at a real good price? That, to me, what happened in Cyprus, to me, again, I don't give financial advice, speaking for myself, and you know, our motto at the TrendsJournal, think for yourself. To me, it could not be clearer why to have gold and silver. Because when this thing collapses, that's the only thing that's going to be of any value. I say that from experience. I mentioned what happened during 9/11 with certificates of deposit. One of the first things I did was I tried to grab my gold, guns, and a getaway plan. I didn't know if Indian Point, 45 miles north of New York City, a nuclear power plant was going to be whacked. If that happened, there would have been chaos like people have never seen. I couldn't get my money because they were in certificates of deposit. Number two, as you well know, I got screwed by MF Global. They robbed my segregated account. The moral of the story, or the immoral of the story, is if you don't have your money where you can grab it without a third party in front of you or a middleman, it ain't your money, Jack. It's somebody else's. So to me, the Cyprus story is one of the great stories of the year, making a point of why owning gold and silver in times of economic instability make the case for it.
Well said, Gerald. And another thing is, I mean, even if they were to all get, well, that's why they did it, because if there was a bank run, they know their dough and their money wasn't in there in the first place. They spent it ages ago. But again, with the gold thing, I want to just ask you this thing with gold and silver. Now, obviously, I wouldn't ask you where you hide yours. That'd be very personal, yeah. But with the gold thing, where do people hide it? Would they disperse it and keep it hidden in different places? Keep a bit on them? I mean, that is one of the things that makes me a bit concerned, Gerald. You know what I mean? Any advice for people there? Some kind of advice, not put it in the bank.
Yeah, I mean, use your head. Yeah, I mean, let's suppose you have a house.
Yeah, yeah,
And you have a garage in your house.
yeah,
Or a basement. And it's filled with paint cans.
yeah, yeah,
And you haven't used all the paint.
yeah.
I mean, you're talking about $100,000 worth of gold that you could put in a small coffee can.
That's true, yeah.
I mean, with all the crap you got laying around, you think somebody's going to find it? How about burying it in the ground somewhere? I mean, people use their heads,
Yeah.
and grow up about this.
Yeah, true.
And you don't tell anybody. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
You only tell maybe one or two people that can be trusted. And hey, trust that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But, if you have a partner of any kind, whether it's in any relationship, they know where it is and you don't tell the kids.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Thanks, Gerald. Thank you for that. It's something like we want to ask people, yeah. On to something else, Gerald. I know we're bouncing around a bit, but I know I haven't got much time with you. The Brics, have you heard about the Brics currency? Now, is there a currency coming out with the Brics? If there is talk of it, I don't know if you've heard about it, is it a lure, another trap and prison for the orphans of the euro crash?
I believe that at some point there is going to be another reserve currency, and I believe the Brics have the best shot at it. But there are so many variables in between that time. For example, I was speaking before about war. This is the way I see it shaping up. I'll pick up the news this week. You see Japan doing war games with the United States right here in the States. And now as Japan goes deeper into a recession, guess what? They're increasing their expenditures on the military. Yeah, you remember those great Japanese, Iwo Jima, the Philippines, the rape of China. I mean, that World War II. Now they're building up again as the United States being their ally. Here's the way I see it, Jason. The United States, NATO, and the Arab Little League against China, Russia, and Iran. Who do you put your money on? Only a bet, nothing personal. You're just a gambler. To me, anybody that thinks they're going to beat the Russians are out of their minds. And you're not going to beat the Chinese with 1.2 billion people and all of the technology that the Western whores sold from the people and sold to the Chinese. And you're not going to beat the Iranians. These are the Persians. They've been around a long time, and they're not going anywhere. So that's the way I see this thing shaping up.
Thanks, Gerald. That's really good advice, Another thing I've caught wind of is that someone told me that they reckon the Germans have got their own euro, and it's separate if the euro crashes. Is there any truth in that?
I don't know, but, if the euro crashes, you could see the countries going back to their old currencies, so they, you go back to the mark, the franc, the lira, and whatever other. I could see. Look, Jason, here we're talking about. I was in Italy in 2002 when the coinage and the currencies came out. The euro when it was being traded, 88 cents to the dollar, by the way, and now what is about 127, $1.27. So now let's look at the situation we're talking about. Now we're talking about Cyprus. If it was 3 weeks ago, a month ago, we'd be talking about Italy. If it was 4 months ago, we'd be talking about Spain. If it was 4.5 months ago, we'd be talking about Greece and the problems. And we'd be talking about Portugal and Ireland. The damn thing is only 10 years old, and they can't hold it together. I can't see this thing lasting. And I can see, again, the game changes. You can't look, I shouldn't say you can't look at it. The way I look at it, it's not a parallel with the currencies or keeping it in a monetary dynamic. There are too many other fundamentals out there. And again, to me, the wild card is war. And you mentioned about the crazy people out there that are running the show. It's a cavalcade of psychopaths and sociopaths. I mean, look, they started the Afghan and Iraq war that are now going to be estimating costing the American people $6 trillion with a T, $6 trillion, $75,000 each household, not to mention the $16 trillion in debt and the other, countless trillions in what they're going to owe in pensions and benefits and other unsecured debts that they're going to have to pay. So again, there's a lot of variables in this before we go back to another currency.
I agree with you, Gerald. That's what worries me. It's definitely an asylum, and in one sense, I'm almost glad it's happening because it's proven to people. I spoke to a woman this morning on the street here where I live, and she said, I've got some inheritance coming. I'm not going to put it in the bank. I said, well, don't. Whatever you do, put it in the bank. She said, I'm going to put it in the house and pay the house off. But that's the problem. It is a house of psychopaths, and it's spreading. It's like a cancer, and it's like an asylum. And like you said, it's war. That's the way they operate. War. They got to be bullying someone. And I've often wondered, Gerald, is it because they're really stupid and their lack of vision and their insatiable lust and greed and power, is that blanking off their wisdom and vision? It obviously is. Or is it that they want to crash the system because they know the minions are waking up like us? And I think it's both. I think you alluded to earlier on. It's probably a bit of both. But it certainly can't be.
I was talking to Dr. Paul Craig Roberts.
Yeah.
Again, this guy was there. He was in the White House.
Yeah.
And I asked him that question too. I said, are they buying all of these, Homeland Security buying all of this ammunition and hollow point bullets because they know it's crashing? And he said, no. He said, I don't think so. He said, do you think the banks are telling the administration how bad it is? The Federal Reserve represents the banks. They're not telling them how fragile it is. There's a big disconnect there. These people are shrewd, but they're not smart. They're politicians. They'll do anything to stay in power and to get money, or a combination of the two. So I used to think that, oh yeah, they're bringing it down because they know we're wising up. I tend to agree with Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. I just think it's out of control. Look, they lost in Iraq. They're lost in Afghanistan. Now they're moving into Africa. Now they're moving into the Asian zone. They're moving into Syria. They are losers. Everything they touch, they lose at. This is what a sociopath is.
Yep.
They never admit their defeats.
Absolutely.
They have no humility. They have no conscience. They're sick people. I don't think it's a grander scheme. I think they're just lunatics.
No, I agree with everything you say. That the great mentor of mine, I've said this to you before, said that government's a sickness. They become sick. They are sick. They're like greedy pigs. They're gobbling everything up. And if you look, and of course bring money into it, and that changes people. I know you did say that it's the people, not the currency, the people's behaviour, the insanity, not the currency. I agree with you there, Gerald, for sure. You put me right on that before, and I agree with you. But they're like a cancer gobbling everything up. They don't know anything other than to gobble things up. And if you look at Cameron and the goons, Boris, whatever his name is, Johnson, these people in their classes in school, they're blooming bonkers. They don't know what's going on. Now they got the bedroom tax. They're going to tax people on their bedrooms. These people are freaks. You're right. And I spoke to Paul recently myself, and I agree with you. And I said to him, Paul, You know, tell me, are these people like the mafia? He said, oh no, they're worse than the mafia, Jason. And he's right. He said at least the mafia are sort of a little bit fair about things, you know. You screw us over, okay. You know, these guys, they're devious, dreadful people. I found out something amazing when I was with Patrick on the Turkish border, speaking with people drinking coffee. One of them told us about, I know we're changing the subject, but I wanted to tell you because Patrick told me to tell you before I left. One of these guys was, you probably know about this. He was telling us that, you know, about the U.S. and Henry Kissinger helped allowing the Turks to take half the island in '74. That maniac, you know. And he said that's been a problem for centuries. I'm quoting. He said they're stuck under the influence of U.S. foreign policy axis. If they go off the reservation, will the bankers call Washington, and Washington calls CIA to send in the Turks again? The military power is what Anglo-American empire has left that allows the bankers to direct events on the ground. How can we overcome this international problem? Do you know anything about that, Gerald, you can say?
Well, you know, again, when you talk about Henry Kissinger, let's realize what happened here. In 1971, Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard in the States. The dollar was still pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. They broke the whole Bretton Woods Agreement. Why? Because we became bankrupt from the Vietnam War. So what happened? Then you had the oil crisis, and here's where the deal was made with Henry Kissinger. They started, the deal was, we'll protect the Saudi dictatorship. They like to call them kings, you know, that's a nicer name. And what we'll do in turn is the Saudis will force everybody to pay for their oil in petrodollars. And that's what brought the United States and maintained it as a reserve currency. And for people that are old enough to remember, like myself, do you know what it cost in the late 70s to get a home mortgage? What the interest rate was because inflation was skyrocketing so much? 22%. So the dollar was dead a long time ago. And it goes back to the Turks have always been flunkies for NATO. They fought in Korea. They fought in Vietnam. They're the enforcers. So, and just as you were mentioning what they're doing now with the Islamists, and as they did in Libya, and they're doing in Syria. They're letting them do their dirty work. What are they doing on the Syrian-Turkish border? Oh, wonderful. They have Patriot missile batteries. Oh, and by the way, some of them coming from Germany. Yeah, you remember that peaceful nation during World War II. So you can see the alliances hooking up here. So yes, I agree with what you're saying.
You're right. It's amazing, isn't it, Gerald? I mean, we're going to run out of time in a few minutes, and it's always a shame to lose you. There's so many things to talk about. It is a financial war to the death, I believe. And you know, I was saying about the vultures hovering above, you know, waiting for the wounded ones that they might have wounded themselves. You know, the old saying, you know, create a problem, give a solution, and the outcome's what you want. I mean, it's sick what we're seeing playing out. I mean, you know, we're talking about people doing something themselves. I had a guy on the other day, he was called Mark Boyle, he was called a moneyless man. He was doing things without money. It's only a little experiment, you know, he's a fascinating guy. And I had another guy on Christos Kamenidis I interviewed the other day he's a professor in the Thessaloniki Aristotle University. He brought the people together who had who were starving, literally, who couldn't buy food in Greece, and the growers who couldn't sell, and they brought them together. Now, I know we can't cut out the middleman now because the system will crash. Where do you see, I know it's not really fair to ask you this question, but where do you see us going with this, Gerald? What can people do to free themselves from the tyranny and from the literal slavery? It's a prison. They're going to take us out of one prison and put us in another, then out of that prison and put us in another. Is there a way forward? Can people somehow get free other than planting leeks and potatoes in their garden? Have people got to come together and get past the xenophobia and past the the divisions between us? Before you go, can you tell us something a little bit, something like that, Gerald, please?
I think that the only solution that I can see, and the only one that makes sense to me, is direct democracy. And they're trying to do it in Ireland. Matter of fact, I went from Munich and I was coming back, and they asked me if I could stop in Ireland to speak to the direct democracy group, and I did. And to me, that's the only solution. It works in Switzerland very well. I mean, after all, it's one of the richest countries in the world. The food's pretty good. Everybody has guns and they don't shoot each other. The people vote. You want to go to war? Let the people vote. You want to close down the banks? Let the people vote. You want to bail out the too big to fails? Let the people vote. Even if you want to put minarets and the people don't want them, or they do want them, let the people vote. And I think the only way out of this is direct democracy. Look, if we could bank online, if they could send trillions of dollars across the globe and around the world every day, you think we could vote online on issues? To me, that's the only way out. Direct democracy. These are not democracies. England, the United States, France, Ireland, Portugal, Italy. Name the country, they're not democracies. All they are mafias. They have a political mafia. They do not represent the people. They represent the most powerful and the people that pay them off. That's it. So let's bring true democracy, direct democracy. To me, that's the only way out.
Yeah, well said, Gerald. And they hinted that they don't help the people. It's definitely not a democracy. It's slavery, pure and simple slavery. And Cyprus has proved it for everyone to see. If you don't think it a slave, you wait till those bank doors close and then they tell you what you can and can't have, Gerald. You know, absolutely.
You know, just one more thing about the banks closing.
Yeah.
I know you know this, but maybe a lot of your listeners don't. They called a bank holiday in the United States back in 1933. And they did the same thing, only different, that they did in Cyprus. They forced everybody to turn in their gold. It was the Emergency Banking Act. And the gold in those days, the dollar was pegged to gold at $20.65 an ounce. On the penalty of law, you 10 years in jail. If they caught you with gold, you'd be fined 3 times the amount that you had. So people turned it in. When they got it all in, they repegged the price of gold to the dollar to $35 an ounce. That means you just took a 75% loss. And I love that language, that white shoe boy language that they use. A haircut. Oh, isn't it wonderful? A little haircut. What haircut? They're stealing your money. So they've done it before, they'll do it again. The proof is already there.
I call it a kick in the BALLS, you know, not a haircut. It's amazing, and the people just keep turning the other cheek, Gerald. And this time we grew up, stood up, and said we're not having it anymore, you know. And like
Amen.
Pete Santilli was on about it the other day. I was on there, and I know you were, and he doesn't mince his words. But listen, we're out of time, Gerald. I don't want to let you go. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you to the TrendsJournal.com. You're doing amazing work over there, and bless you, Gerald Celente, and please keep up the fantastic work, please.
And you too, and to Patrick and Pete and all the rest of you guys, it's wonderful what you're doing. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks, Gerald. Bless you. Bye.
Bye-bye.